Greetings and salutations and welcome to Illegitimate Legends, the show where I like to talk about some of the more unusual League of Legends builds. My name is Artima, and today I am actually going to talk about two builds, because I was like, I want to play Yasuo. He's got a new skin coming out that's pretty awesome, and it has since come out, and it is pretty awesome, but I got some problems with it, which I'll get to later, because this is going to be fairly cash, you know? Just a bit cash. Yeah, so I was like, I want to try and do something with Yasuo. I don't really want to do an AP Yasuo build because that would have worked before his dash got nerfed, back when it had the potential to build up 100% bonus damage. Would have been good. But let's go for a support. I mean, he's got a wind wall, so he's basically Brom with more damage and less stuns. So, you know, that's the theory. Long story short, don't. Just don't even try. It's not worth doing. There's a number of mechanical problems. The first is that the wind wall requires width, and level 1 it doesn't have the width, which means you need at least like level 3 before it starts being actually useful in a fight, which means you need to be level 5 if my memory serves. If not, it's level 7. Can't remember which. Don't really care. Yeah, to be level 5. Either way, that's a big bummer if you're trying to build a build around an ability. If it only becomes useful fairly, you know, towards the end of early game, then that's not good. That's not a good start at all. The second problem is, what do you do? I first tried like an AP build, going with a spell thief. Just like, I will dash into people and steal their money and deal damage at the same time by dashing through minions, and then I'll dash back through minions to get back to safety and wind wall to save my ally. And that's a great theory, except when you realize that the moment you start dashing, the enemy starts running away and auto-attacking you, or stunning you, and then you die, because you're Yasuo and you have 0% survivability. It's actually quite amusing to see my flailing efforts. Like, it's not good. It's just like, I've got this plan in my head and I can see it working, but when you actually try and implement it in the game, you realize that other people have brains and will ruin your day. So you can't dash for damage. There's no build that will leave your poke with any damage, like your little jab move. Like, that won't help you, ever. It will legitimately accomplish 0 things. Nothing good will come of that, unless you've built damage, and you, like, when I go support, I try to actually deliberately avoid building damage outside of Zeke's Herald, because I'm not there to be a damage dealer, I'm there to support. So maybe Yasuo can work in a kill lane, particularly with someone with a knock-up. I didn't play a single game with anyone else with a knock-up, just weird dashes, which made for interesting mechanics, which I never got to utilize, but anyway, yeah, long story short, you've got nothing you can use to help an AD carry, unless you've got some sort of mysteriously magical AD carry that has a knock-up. So unless you're playing with Vel'Koz as your ADC, and good on you if you are, and even then you guys are totally fucked, because Vel'Koz relies on a good support for the first little while, and Yasuo is anything but a good support. Long story short, none of the builds I tried worked, and I experimented quite freely. Don't do it. The other direction that I looked at, which I mentioned earlier, and I only played one game of this, is an AP Yasuo. It's legitimately rush Lichbane, deal damage. That's nice, until you get into a team fight and realize that your damage output is basically non-existent. Yeah, just look, stick to building Yasuo the normal way, the legitimate way, and that's the only way you're going to end up with a viable build. Now, the rest of the video is only going to be vaguely about Yasuo, or I think it might be a lot about Yasuo. I'm just going to sort of freestyle spitball a few ideas around, because I'd like to address the notion of Yasuo and the very problem he presents from my perspective. I don't like to play champions the way they are meant to be played. Or rather, I like to experiment and try new things. That's why I make this series, is so that I can go, that's a champion, I wonder what I can do with them that isn't the norm. I don't necessarily like winning, I like trying new things and discovering that hey, maybe this might work up to a certain point, or maybe this is legitimately viable even in high-level play, like I think some of my builds actually are. The problem is, and the problem that Yasuo shows to me, is that Riot don't like this. They've actively been denying this sort of philosophy, and only accidentally does it come about. Yasuo has 2 functional builds, and only one of them is viable. So let's talk about these words for a minute. Build is not build as in the exact set of items that you get, because like I see those as build options. A build itself, in this terminology, I'm going to be using to mean core concept for your build. So an AD is a build, AP is a build. They're fairly extreme, or can be varied on to be not as extreme and build other things into them, but the core concept is you deal damage with AD, or you build AP and deal damage with that, or you build tanky, because roles are not builds. So we need a word in between roles and builds to describe the things that I've just described to you. Build paths, on the other hand, are the individual way that you get to your goal. Then we get onto the other builds, or the other builds, the other words that I'm using here. Inviable, viable, and I literally just said the word and I've already forgotten it. I don't actually use inviable very much. Okay, it doesn't matter. There's basically 3 ways a build can be. Functional. There, we found the word. Good job, brain. There's 3 ways a build can be. Non-functional means that it's not going to work ever. Functional means it maybe kind of works a little bit, but you're relying on your team to carry you a little bit, at least at some stage in the game. Like, it's something that you could play around with and troll, or rather muck around with, do in a game where you're playing for fun, do it in normals. Viable is a build where I would consider taking it into a ranked game. AD carry Vel'Koz is viable. I've taken it in ranked games and won with it. It was hilarious. Utterly hilarious. AP Yasuo, because we're talking about him. AP Yasuo is a functional build. I won the game with it. I don't think I'd win another one if I tried. I think you'd lose more times than you won, but you'd enjoy it because it's just so silly. And the fact that I outlaned Mundo in a pretty serious way is hilarious to me, because it's like, oh, you're a giant bully champion? Well, guess what? I'm a squishy little man building AP instead of AD, I'm gonna bully you more. That's funny to me, but it's not good, because any other champion could have kicked my ass. And that's what I'm going to talk about a bit. And from this point onward, let's talk about Riot and the fact that they keep doing things like this. Yasuo has only one viable means of play. He's such a specific champion. Everything about him, even though he's got an AP ratio, just the one, but still, even though he's got an AP ratio, that AP ratio is more or less there for appearances, because the ratio's not good enough that any build reliant on AP would work, and it's just there to maybe open in the heads of people that I could build a little bit of AP and benefit from it. So I'm going to get 100% benefit, except for the mana, so let's go with 80% benefit out of a Triforce. It opens up more things like that, because if there wasn't an AP ratio there, people would look at Triforce and go, 1/3 of the Triforce, the Sheen component, apart from its unique effect, benefits me in 0 way. Absolutely none. And maybe there's a few other items that have AP mixed in them that you can go, well, they're going to benefit me in some small way, and that's something that I can appreciate, so I will take that. Other than things like that, there hasn't been a champion in the longest time that has multiple viable builds that has been released. Like I said, there's been accidents, happy little accidents, like there's a functional build for Braum, where it's just AD and attack speed, or something like that. I think it's actually on-hit effects and attack speed, and you're just like, oh hey, you're stunned now, die. And like I said, functional, not viable. Vel'Koz is only viable as an AD carry because of the combination of his passive and the fact that his attack doesn't have a projectile, it just hits. That's more like a happy little accident that came out of his character's aesthetic design rather than anything deliberate by Riot. And I think that if an AD carry Vel'Koz became borderline meta, like if people played it a lot, it would actually be nerfed so that it could be affected by Braum's Shield and Yasuo's Wind Wall. And that would disappoint me greatly, because the whole point of that build is that it bypasses those things. That's its only advantage over any other ADC. Braum can only be a tank. Yasuo can only be a relatively high speed damage champion. He's basically like, hey, I'm gonna build relatively glass cannon and rely on lifesteal and mobility to survive. That's what you're saying to the enemy team when you pick him, instead of things like the old Master Yi. Now Master Yi was broken. I'm gonna throw that right out there. His AP build was too good at countering anybody. But it meant that if you rolled into a game as Master Yi, they had to go, is he building for magic damage output? Or is he building for physical damage output? And before AP Yi became popular, you had the option of throwing the enemy team a curveball. One of the reasons my Yasuo AP build won the lane is Mundo built early armor. He got a Duran's shield first, because he's like, well, I'm up against Yasuo in top. I'm going to deal with him by countering his damage, which is the appropriate mindset, but I was building magic damage. Champions where that is possible are becoming fewer and further between. Now you're saying, how can they be getting fewer? Well, they took all AP powers out of Master Yi. He now only has one build option. Multiple build paths, but one build option. He can do one thing. It's being reduced. AP Gangplank is progressively dying. Every time they've nerfed Gangplank in the last 2 years, it has in some way affected in a negative way. I should have said change instead of nerf, because they've changed him a few times more than they've nerfed him. Anyway, they've impacted his AP ratios, because his AP build is quite strong. It was never stronger than Glass Cannon, because a Glass Cannon Gangplank could just run in and one-shot people. AP Gangplank could never reach that point, but with nerfs to Lichbane and nerfs to his ult's AP ratio, it's only gotten worse over time. As a person who does what I do and enjoys what I do, the things that I like to do, it's really disappointing to see that we're getting into a state of the game where, yes, every champion is fairly well balanced. Many people disagree with me on that and go, no, they're blatantly overpowered. I've lost 50 ranked games to them. That's just because you didn't counter them. However, they're supposed to be counted. Like, I don't feel that any champion is so powerful that they cannot be dealt with right now. But at the same time, part of that is because you know exactly what to expect out of 90% of the champions. Particularly when you've been playing as long as I have. I know every champion. I know how they work. I know that I'm utterly terrible with a lot of them and just can't get their mechanics myself. But when there's a champion whose mechanics I can't do or I can't utilize, I've seen enough of them beating on my ass to know how they work, and thus to know a way around how they work. Usually comes with play defensive. How you play defensive depends on who you're defending against. But there's always options, all because I know what to expect. Maybe I've been playing League of Legends too long, but maybe the fault lies in the fact that there's not enough options. There's not enough champions released where I can legitimately go, I can build this guy in 2 different ways, with 2 entirely different philosophies around the ways that he's built. That was the beauty of AP Gangplank versus Critplank, or Tankplank, or Tiamat Gangplank. Tiamat Gangplank, back when Tiamat was a stackable thing, had to target the person he wanted to deal the least damage to, but was still closest to the person he wanted to do the most damage to. That's weird. That's a strange thought process. That makes the game very interesting. Because the next time you play Gangplank, you'll think completely differently, because you'll think, I'm AP Gangplank. I can legitimately catch as many stuns on my face as I want, because as soon as I want to leave, it's citrus and gone. Full health and leave. Drop an ult down, deal massive area damage, and deal moderate size burst with the Q. Crit planks, run in, one-shot an enemy champion, die. That was his play. And Tank Plank was similar to the first, or the AP Gangplank option, in that it's catch every single effect that you can, and then cure them all, but he dealt more damage up front and was generally trying to be a sticky person because of his natural slow. And all of these options still exist in Gangplank, but let's look at Master Yi again. As I've said, completely different mindset. Run out of the bush with Wuju style, activate it just as you hit the enemy champion, and wail on them. They're dead, glass cannon. It's fantastic fun. Once you get your ultimate, it's even easier. You've probably used Alpha Strike actually to close distance more than anything else. And your meditate exists usually as a means of, I've just made it back to the tower, I'm probably gonna die, let's prevent the death and prevent the enemy staying to wail on me, because I'm healing up and the tower's hitting them back. Or I'm going to hold out until my team gets here, and I'm going to use this ability for that. The armor and magic resist became more important than the heal. Whereas AP Yi uses his heal to restore his health between fights, and to restore his health between pokes, and focused on a mechanic of, okay, I'm going to hit a minion and rely on RNGesus to carry me to the enemy, which was, like I've said, OP. Or I'm going to hit an enemy and rely on RNGesus to deal as much damage to everyone else, but then hit them once with the Lichbane Strike and retreat, because I legitimately cannot survive any other encounter. I don't have enough health, or, like, if I get out, I'm fine, I'll just meditate it back. But if I'm still in, and you stun me, it's game over, man. Game over. I don't have enough examples, which is really strange for a person in my position where I've made 100,000 examples. But champions are becoming progressively more specific. This is my little conclusion bit. In general, champions released from Riot are becoming progressively more specific to their intended role, which is largely to do with the sheer number of champions we have. There's so many champions that it's hard to come up with something different to what already exists, because you don't want to just rehash stuff. So it's hard to come up with something different to what already exists without doing something completely just out there, using brand new mechanics and such, which is what they're bringing in with your Braum and your Yasuo. And that's a good thing. But a lot of these new champions are so specific that they can never perform a role outside of that which they are intended. And that narrows the meta of the game. That narrows everything. It shortens the learning curve, because to learn Yasuo, all you need to learn is one set of play, one skill line. Or to learn how to fight him, all you need to do is go, okay, these are his skills, and this is how they function. He's going to get damage exceptionally fast because he's going to build crit chance. And just a little bit of crit chance will murder me, and is going to get a static shiv at exactly this time because it's so incredibly viable that there's no other option. And that's just it. There's no other option. And I want to live in a world in which there are a vast array of options. Not necessarily for everybody. Every champ doesn't need 1,000,000 options, but I'd like there to be some that have 1,000,000 options. Like, what I'm saying, legitimately what the purpose of the last 10-15 minutes has been, is for me to say, hey Riot, guys, I know you're busy, I know you're doing some stuff, but can you just release another Gangplank or Nasus, or one of those champions that just has every option available to it? Gangplank can legitimately play in every single role. Top lane, or rather, tanking for his team, so the top lane sort of bruisery position. He can play in the mid as an AP, he can play in a support lane with a Zeke's Herald combined with his freaking raise morale. He can play in the bot lane as a crit-based AD carry. It's not very good, but it's doable. And he can play in the jungle also as any of the previous builds. Not so much the AP, but it can be done. But he can play as a bruiser from the jungle, he can play as an AD carry, with glass cannon, crit chance from the jungle, or he can play to run in with raise morale and a Zeke's. I don't know why, but you could do it, it would work. I want more champions with that level of customizability, because that is where a person has the option to make their champion their own. To not just follow the builds that they read online because they're the most viable, because they might go, but I prefer this ability, and I haven't found a build which matches my playstyle with this champion, because I want to play him in this particular way. And so I'm going to customize a build that already exists that maybe relies on the same things that I do, but bend it in my direction. And at the same time, for someone like myself, it gives me vast degrees of content. Like, not that I care about producing as much stuff as possible, I think that much is fairly obvious right now, but it gives me the option to look at a champion and go, how many different things can I come up with? Like, I could just do a 1 hour video on a one champion if they had 5 different roles, because each role would have multiple options, multiple build paths to achieve each build that you can do. And there's somewhere in the middle a perfect hybrid of everything, which would be utterly terrible, but I want a champion where I can find that, where they're using their AP and their AD and their tanky and supporting their team at the same time. I don't know, we're getting completely into the realm of insanity here, because a champion that can do everything can do nothing, as well as a specific champion. But wouldn't that be interesting? Wouldn't that be interesting to actually get into a game and not, like, just every game? Maybe not every game, but 1 in every 3 games. Wouldn't it be interesting to have the enemy pick a champion where you don't know which lane they're going? It'd make the game harder, that's for sure, but at the same time, it would make the order of, you know, which champion's being picked much more interesting, because you'd want to pick your most generalized champion first, so that they're like, is that person, where are they going? And if someone's super stubborn on their team, they've got the option of changing their mind. They can go, well, obviously this guy's gonna go mid and not talk to his team the whole intro. Maybe I'll just change my plan and go top instead. Or jungle, the place where that person had originally been delegated to because they're a git and don't communicate with their team. It's something I want to see more of. It's a perspective that Riot doesn't take on their champions, is how many different ways can we approach, or can this champion approach the game. It's more or less, let's make someone very specifically intended for a role, but let's make them different from everyone else specifically intended for that role. I feel that the perspective is valid, and that's the point I'm trying to bring across, is that maybe there's a place for generalist champions. They make the game more interesting to me. I don't know. I think I'm done here. Y'all have a good night. The thing I was gonna say about Yasuo and his new skin. This is gonna sound fairly... okay, let's just say it. You fucked up, Riot. You done fucked up. Your skin looks beautiful. I love it. And I love the fact that it's got its own little voice filter. I'm pretty sure you didn't redo any of the voice. Maybe you did. I don't know. I don't know what you do in your crazy cave. But all the movement dialogue is really nice. You know the problem? The problem, and maybe this is just a problem for me, but I'm pretty sure it's universal, because it seems odd that I'd miss a few sound files. You didn't put the filters on his Control 1, Control 2, Control 3, Control 4, aka his taunts, his jokes. And so he sounds like regular Yasuo when he's joking and drinking his beer, and then sounds like a super awesome robot man when he's moving, or when you command an attack. And, you know, that's just lazy. I'm pretty sure you've got those files, or those filters on those files somewhere. It's just, why aren't they attached to the champion when I played it? I don't know. I don't know what you did or what I did that broke it, but it doesn't sound right and I don't like it, and fix it. And I'm done with this rant. I'm going. Goodbye. Thank you all for watching, and I will... not really watching at this point. Thank you all for listening, and I will see you in the future with more builds that are interesting, because, you know, I've been asking for builds lately and people have thankfully been sending me some. So yeah, Malzahar next, and probably more things after that. They're balls to the wall crazy, because I feel like going insane. Yasuo support, don't do it. Thank you all for watching, goodbye.